Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to all. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Mohammad Khalil. I'm the director of the Muslim Studies program. And thank you all for joining us for this special webinar. I shouldn't say special, it's not special, but it's a webinar about Ramadan and COVID-19. And that's what makes it not so special. And what we're going to do is I'm going to begin with some general remarks about Ramadan, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Farha Abbasi. We're delighted to have her with us. She's one of the leading figures in the world, really, when it comes to the topic of Muslim mental health. She's a psychiatrist and a professor at Michigan State. And just recently, she was appointed by Mayor Andy Shore of Lansing to the Mental Health Task Force in dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. So we're delighted to have her with us. So we're going to say a few words, and then we'll open the floor for questions, and we'll wrap up by 5 o'clock. And again, this is being recorded. So let's get started. I wrote up a little kind of summary or a guide regarding Ramadan. So I'm just going to go over a few key points. And let me actually mute everybody else, just so that, just for now. Then I'll unmute you later. Okay, so just some key basic ideas. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar, so it goes by the new moon. And this is the month that Muslims believe the Quran, the Islamic holy book, was revealed. This year, Ramadan will begin actually tomorrow at sunset. So once sunset hits, that's Ramadan, at least for many Muslims. There's actually a difference of opinion as to when exactly you should begin. Do you actually have to see the new moon? Do you go by NASA calculations? So you might see people with different start dates, they might be off by a day or two. Anyway, for many, certainly here in East Lansing, Ramadan begins tomorrow night. So once sunset arrives. And the month will last 29 or 30 days, again, depending on when the new moon is seen or calculated. And what's interesting is the Islamic calendar is 11 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. So that means that every year, the Islamic calendar shifts relative to the Gregorian calendar. So this year, Ramadan begins April 23rd at night. Next year, it will begin April 12th at night. And the year after that, April 1st, roughly, April 1st at night. Fasting in the month of Ramadan is considered one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's a very important thing. And the Quran says that fasting was prescribed so that believers may attain God consciousness or taqwa. So the idea is that it's supposed to be a time for spiritual growth. And practicing Muslims who are able to do so are generally expected to abstain from eating, drinking, and yes, that includes water, and sexual relations from dawn to sunset each day of the month. And again, the key thing here is if you are able to do so. If you're not able to do so, obviously you are not expected to do so. Many Muslims will also perform various prayers and acts of devotion, especially at night, and sometimes past midnight. And so what I always tell people is, I think the hardest thing about Ramadan is not the hunger and the thirst, but the fatigue. Lack of sleep. I think for many people, that's maybe the harder dimension. One thing about this COVID-19 era is many Muslims are used to going to the mosque in Ramadan, especially at night, especially for nighttime prayers. And now that's not really an option. Mosques are closed, generally speaking. So that's going to be something that will require some adjusting. And maybe Dr. Abbasi will say a word or two about that. Those who are ill, traveling, or unable to fast for other reasons are exempt from the Ramadan fast. And in general, if you're able to do so, people are expected to make up the fast later after Ramadan. And the end of Ramadan is marked by a holiday called Eid al-Fitr, which means the festival of breaking the fast. This year, that's going to be, at least here in East Lansing, it's going to be on May 24th, or the night of May 23rd. And this is one of the 2 major Islamic holidays. If you have questions about general questions about Ramadan, you're certainly welcome to ask those questions here. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Abbasi to talk about the mental health dimensions.
Thank you so much, Mohammad, for doing this, and thank you all for being here. So from a mental health provider point of view, I always like to focus on the vulnerability of the moment. So we already were talking about how Ramadan and fasting can affect you positively, but can affect you adversely. Like Muhammad Khalil said, that the two aspects of fasting. So the positive aspects is when you are meditating, you're praying, you're spiritually connecting, that can be really positive resiliency factors for you. But when we talk about fatigue or erratic sleep hours or erratic eating hours, then that can be a very aggravating or exacerbating factor for those who are already struggling with mental health concerns. But that given and said, I also always like to put it in the perspective of how it's going to affect our students. So it's interesting that this year, the Ramadan is starting at a time where it would be finals week, and already the students feel very stressed out. So we have been, this year we started this conversation early on that how we can facilitate and help our students who want to adhere to fasting and do well in their studies, how we can support them. But unfortunately, on top of that, another layer of vulnerability has been added by this quarantine, this COVID-19 pandemic situation. A lot of our classes were switched to online classes, and that created a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability for a lot of students. Not everyone can adjust well to the online teaching. So that was a big source of anxiety. And then the fact that this pandemic, we thought that it's going to be for a few days, it's extending. It's like you are experiencing a loss every day, but still the loss is not ending. So this is what we call feeling the trauma of the moment, but an ongoing anticipatory grief, anxiety, like where is this going to lead to? Where is this going to end? How is it going to impact my academics? How is it going to impact my personal setting? So that in itself was having a big effect on our student population. But on top of that, those who adhere and wants the feeling of Ramadan, the being in community, sharing meals, being with loved ones, all that, and being in the Islamic center, being in an Islamic religious setting, all that is going to be lost this year, which is, I feel like almost like a spiritual trauma or grief that on top of everything we are dealing with. Then we have this vulnerable population. These are our foreign students that are kind of stuck here, that usually were dependent on Islamic Center to get that loving warmth and family surrounding or community support that they are going to be. Of course, I know Islamic Center is stepping up, will still be providing meals, but the nurturing part, the support part would be missing. So that's another concern that we have to keep in mind. So I feel like right now it's just a multiple layers of trauma, anxiety, and grief that these students are dealing with. And I hope that those of you who are going to be helping them through their exams or studies or would be grading them, please take that in, that you will keep that in scenario while going forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abbasi. So now we're going to open the floor for questions. So I guess this is kind of a free-for-all. Feel free to just go ahead and ask a question, and we'll hope that you're not asking at the exact same time as somebody else. And remember, your question can be about Ramadan in general. It can be about Ramadan and COVID-19. It could be about, how to deal with students who are observing Ramadan as a professor or as a staff member, etc. So certainly this has been an issue, a topic of conversation among various, scholars of Islam. One of the things that I've been seeing a lot is scholars saying that, yeah, if it's going to be detrimental to your health, then you do not fast at that point. And then if you're able to, then make up the fast later. That's sort of the common thing. So yeah, that's really all that I've seen in that regard. Yeah.
Discussion with our Imam Suhail as well, and that's what exactly was said in that also. But I also would kind of use this moment to explain that even if you have physical concern, if you are struggling with mental health issues or have been diagnosed with mental illnesses, then also you are exempt from fasting. And I know that COVID-19 not only has physical symptoms, it has a lot of mental health prodromal symptoms, but after you are recovering, that also people are expressing a lot of depression and anxiety after recovering from it. So I would take really good care of yourself and make sure you give yourself time for healing.
Hey, Salah, how are you?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
on my phone.
No,
Sorry, I can't do the video thing very well here in this situation I'm in, so I'm not going to.
That's okay.
But I had two, one's a comment and one's a question, but if you could respond to the comment. Did you hear the White House briefing a couple of days ago when Donald Trump suggested that there was going to be, that when Muslims gathered either for Eid or, to pray during Ramadan, that there would not be a call for them to abstain from that in the same way that Christians were encouraged not to attend church services during Easter. So if you wanted to comment on that, that statement it's purely speculative, and again, sort of in line with a lot of other things that he said about, but the idea that there'd be a pro-Muslim bias during Ramadan in the U.S. is quite interesting and unique, I think. But the other question I had is, like, what kind of things are community leaders saying to the congregation of Muslims in the U.S. generally about Jummah prayer and family gatherings during Ramadan for iftar and other community events that might be organized on behalf of people in need in the Muslim community? Are they discouraging that, or are they actually saying, we have to go ahead and continue our traditions despite the pandemic and the call to socially isolate and stay at home?
Thank you, Salah. Dr. Abbasi, do you want to begin and I'll follow up?
I just want to comment on the President Trump's comment about that the Islamic centers would be allowed to pray, and that Muslims are being given preferential treatment in the country. I think that's the biggest vulnerability. We, as right now practicing Muslims, we are always being targeted at a government level to legislation to. So that's another vulnerability. And then on top of that, the immigration ban that just came out. So that's why what I say, that there is so many layers of losses right now, of feeling vulnerable right now, that to me, being in an academic setting is a big challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. And I'll
mental health.
Absolutely. And regarding your question, Salah, I know that across the country, across North America, Muslim organizations have been saying stay at home. Which is remarkable that there's that much agreement. But, of course, I'm sure there are exceptions somewhere, I'm sure. But overwhelmingly, that's been the message, certainly at the mosque here in East Lansing, the Islamic Society of North America, just across the continent. It's been remarkable to see people saying stay at home, even for Friday prayer, even in Ramadan. And again, I'm sure there are exceptions, but overwhelmingly, actually, I haven't really seen the exceptions, so that just shows you how overwhelming it's been. Yeah.
Isn't there did you guys see the billboard that went up in Chicago? So it seems like Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam already pointed it out. When there is a pandemic, you have to quarantine and not leave the area of infection or come to that area. So actually, Chicago has a big billboard stating that. And that's you said, that everybody is encouraging quarantine, isolation. The Jummah, instead of khutbahs, there are Jummah bayans that all the imams in the country are doing. And same way, they have very extensive Ramadan programs that would be offered online. So everybody is really adhering to it.
And I'll add too that in many Muslim majority countries now, in the call to prayer even, they add a line about how it's better to stay at home. And that's actually, there's a precedent from that from early Islamic history to actually say in the call to prayer, pray at home. So
thanks for that.
Absolutely. Other questions? Feel free to unmute your mic and ask. Yes, Elisa.
Oh, I'm just curious. That's so interesting about the adhan. Have you heard of it, that being in any Muslim minority countries, the adhan being changed to say that?
That's a good question. I haven't. I certainly haven't heard anyone use that version of the adhan in the U.S. Of course, part of that is because the adhan is usually, it's not broadcast, although in Hamtramck it is, which is what you study. So I actually wonder, have you heard anything?
I'm going to find it. Now it's a question. Thank you.
That's an interesting one to consider, for sure. Very good. Other questions?
While I'm in the box, if nobody else has anything this second, I wanted to ask Dr. Abbasi, I'm very interested in what you were saying about the depression and anxiety being part of this syndrome. Could you talk a little bit more about what you have been learning about that, and the frequency and duration, severity, and also just from the perspective of your job taking care of Muslim students in particular, a little bit more about that.
So I'm assuming you're talking about COVID-19 infection itself, right? So it's almost like a near-death experience, even if you have been comparatively healthy, but just the fear. So it's almost like a trauma, and we are wondering, we don't have the data and research right now, but I think we would see a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder kind of things. So we are seeing it affecting not only the people who are suffering, but people who are providing care are being very traumatized. So we will see a high number of, so what we have seen is high number of decompensation in the patients who were already feeling depressed and anxious. But then you do get calls from family and friends and so-and-so's kid and that they are feeling panic attacks, anxiety, and it's just natural. This is unprecedented trauma that we are experiencing right now. But that's said and done. We also, there's some cases out there that the virus can affect the brain as well. So there has been cases of encephalitis kind of presentations, or headaches, or migraine kind of picture. Because right now, even today, like the case I was dealing with, we think we know how it's presenting and what symptoms or what system it's affecting, but it's not clear yet. So that's the biggest problem with the people like to compare it with flu, but with flu, we know now the trajectory. With this, we don't. So that's the thing we are seeing. So it is just being in that traumatizing situation. It is natural that you would experience a lot of anxiety and sadness. But other thing is, because you are so isolated, you don't have the support and the ability to be around your loved ones. That I think in itself is playing into this big scenario also, but then there is direct impact of the virus on the brain.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first thing I would say is there is something called suhoor, which is where people wake up before the time for starting to fast, before Fajr, the first prayer. And I would say that it's really important to actually eat and drink something, before you start fasting. So for example, if it's 5 o'clock that you have to stop eating and drinking, I would wake up at 4:30 and drink a lot of water, and I would avoid foods that have a lot of salt. I don't know, Dr. Abbasi, what advice do you have?
It's funny what Imam said, fast, not feast. Definitely eating more nutritious foods is helpful, not dehydrating foods like salt or too much caffeine is also like one of the things that to avoid.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Let's see, I think, Sam, did you have a question? I'll unmute Sam here.
But I was gonna, on a lighter note, we always complain about being in Michigan and this weather. For once in the month of Ramadan, I'm very glad it's not that hot and the days still are shorter. But I know as soon as the fasting month starts, it starts to get hot. So at least right now, you can enjoy this weather, and I hope the fasting would be easier.
Yes. By the way, for those of you who are not in Michigan, it did snow today. Okay.
Yeah, it's snowing. So it's interesting the way we understand the science of fasting. So the intermittent fasting is supposed to give you more energy because you are detoxifying your body. The blood supply is not going to your stomach, it's going to your brain. But the thing is, as far as the immunity going down, I haven't seen any studies, scientific studies, that fasting brings your immunity down. But even if that is the case, if you feel weak, you can always stop fasting. But the good thing is you are still in quarantine, so you don't have any new exposures coming in. But unfortunately, with COVID-19, we are not even sure. We initially thought that it is more worse outcomes for those who are immunocompromised, but now we are seeing some very young deaths as well. So with the virus, I'm not sure what it really is, the mechanism and how it impacts. We have seen, so I was reading a report about a physician talking about that there were this young man in the ER, and the x-ray on the chest x-ray, it was a really bad picture, but he was up and about, laughing, joking, and then within a second, his oxygen levels hit 0 and he died. So I don't think we have to be afraid that fasting will make us vulnerable, but then using that insight that you have the facility in Islam, that if you are feeling weak, if you feel that you are not able to, or you feel like your throat is hurting or you are having any symptoms, then you can always stop fasting and make it up in other days.
There is a belief that the Quran was revealed in Ramadan, and the night it was revealed is called the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. And there's a lot of debate as to when exactly that is and what that signifies. A very common belief, very popular belief, is that that was sometime during the final 10 nights of Ramadan. And even more popular, or not, sorry, another within that group, there's a group that believes that it's specifically the 27th night of Ramadan. So on the 27th night, you'll see many people make it a point to go to the mosque and to worship more than they usually do, because it's considered a night that's better than 1,000 months. Now, in the age of COVID, in the era of COVID-19, you have many Muslim leaders saying that you can do all the worship you want to do at home. So all the prayers you want to do, all the reading of the Quran, all of that, you can do that at home. Actually, Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he himself is only recorded to having led prayer, like extra prayers at night in Ramadan, I think like 4 times. And then he stopped because he didn't want people to think it's obligatory. So the message that a lot of Muslims are getting is, yeah, worship, do all that good stuff, but do it, do it at home in private. and not at the mosque. So thank you.
No, I agree. And there's something I've realized, that Islam is very interesting in the concept that it starts with an individual. Your individual relationship with God is the most integral and basic thing to establish. And then the hope is that you share that with your family, then the community, and then the society. So from one individual, it goes and create this community, this ummah concept. But then when in times of struggle or famine or pandemics, it comes back to that individual unit again. So the relationship with God is not defined by where or who you are praying with. It is what your relationship with God is.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. Okay, other questions? Feel free to unmute your mic and ask away.
Definitely, when I thought of this presentation, I was focusing on students like you and people who are away from their families and loved ones. The point that I think, unfortunately, we can't physically have people over or be at an Islamic center. So how to make the most of it is, there is something we call cognitive reframing. So if we start cognitive reframing, is instead of focusing on the negative, can we look at the positive? So instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm alone and isolated, think of this way, oh, I'm keeping myself safe and I'm keeping my friend and loved ones safe. So instead of feeling like, oh, there's no one here to worship with me, say, even by staying home, I am servicing humanity. It's a huge sacrifice. And Ramadan is a month of sacrifice, right? We are supposed to give up everything. So maybe this is an added test for us to give up being around loved ones, being around support. But instead of feeling sad and lonely, I always say, lonely is not alone. And this is the moment to really create that bonding with God and find yourself in that spirituality and practice. So, and yes, there is talk out there having virtual iftars. Each one of us is going to use the new clothes that we bought. We are going to dress up and try to do the most we can. But another thought I had was that maybe sending each other those care packages, or sending each other those love messages, or showing this is really the moment to express the gratitude and love. Maybe we take these things so much for granted that maybe this is the moment to reinforce that and send those messages. And the same way, I hope you get some really beautiful gifts and messages as well.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. Appreciate that. Next question.
I would add one more thing from a professional point of view. That was my personal, but from a professional point of view, please stay in touch. If you are talking to a therapist or a mental health provider, a social worker, or even a good friend that has been your go-to person, please use all that resources. And I hope you are aware, we have East Lansing Muslim Women Group, that we are doing regular webinars through that too. And I will also continue to do webinars in Ramadan through them. So please use all the possible resources, but in the end, it's all here. You have all the power here. So the Islamic Center has set it up. You will get drive-through iftars.
Yes, and I'll add to that. So there's an iftar for those who would like it at the Islamic Center, and also with regard to MSU, Raghib, if you send me an email, I can connect you to folks in the residential housing office, and we can see what options you have exactly. My email address is KHALILMO, khalilmo@msu.edu. So feel free to email me, and we can try to figure out what's going on from the MSU perspective as well.
That sounds like a good pop group. Khalil Mo. That's good. But yes, please reach out to Islamic Center as well. They are also going to be providing a lot of resources.
Thank you. Next question, please. This is open to whoever would like.
So one thing I do want to add to that, I know being a foreign graduate and being first year, there's already a lot of adjustments and a lot of things, but just I want to share this piece with you that we all have to make these sacrifices right now. There are people who cannot go and check on their parents, and even for me, I wouldn't have all my daughters here during Ramadan. All those so just keeping that positive perspective that you are not alone in this, that everyone is going through this, and just keeping in connect, find out what resources are around you. There are still families who would like to help you through this. So please find out what resources are out there.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. Next question.
So how is it going to affect you, Mohammad? How is it going to be different Ramadan for you?
I think the biggest thing that stands out is the, not going to people's homes for iftar, not going to Taraweeh, losing the communal dimension. I think that's the thing that really stands out about this Ramadan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Dr. Abbasi, can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective as a psychiatrist, just understanding how how communities work for resilience? Can you talk about the limits and perhaps limits and barriers of using these online methods, even this webinar or the online iftars? What are some of the ways that they do fulfill the same functions, but what are some of the ways that they don't?
So first of all, I think being in community is very important to us. So especially when you are going through a vulnerable moment, may it be sickness, may it be illness, may it be mental health challenges. But especially in Ramadan, for those of us who are not close to their family, it's the community provides that supportive, nurturing environment for you. But I also talk about the limitation is, so if somebody is struggling already with anxiety and social anxiety or depression, then this can be added burden being in community, and they would like to not participate. And then they feel really guilty that why aren't we feeling the same happiness, or why aren't we feeling that connection? And that's why I talk about having that awareness that mental illness can affect you both ways. You can seek a company or you want to isolate. And that's where not only you have to be an advocate for yourself and navigate it accordingly what your needs are, but the community also have to become more cognizant about mental health challenges and not impose, like parents and forcing their kids, why aren't you going? This is Ramadan. Like Mohammad Khalil made it such an important point that this was a community need for us that we evolved, because being in a country where we don't have our roots or families or loved ones close by, that the Islamic centers became this place, a hub of our identity and culture and religious practices. But it's not really a requirement by Islam. So you could practice at home. So, but the families then, the ritual becomes so important that for some families, it's hard to understand why their kids don't want to participate. Or so keeping both the sides of it in mind is important. Other thing is how the virtual communities have been helpful is, I think we are very adaptable. Human beings are very adaptable. So I think it is like you you want to use whatever is out there. So this has been really comforting. And anyhow, if we look at from medicine or even our professional meetings, where more and more meetings we're already switching to Zooms and virtually connecting, sharing our work. So it was just already a part of the society that was already there. This tool was already present. The kids right now are more connected to each other through social media than in person. So this actually has been really advantageous. Of course, it's not the same as being in person. Like, it's different seeing somebody cook a yummy meal and show you the pictures on Facebook and social media, and worse, you eating it, right? That's the difference, right? So it's fun to still see everybody cooking, but then you are still eating your own cooking. So that's the piece that can be hard. But I think this virtual connection has been really significant and helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. By the way, you asked me how this will affect me. How will this affect you, if you don't mind me asking?
It's affecting me terribly. I just said I'm going to miss all the yummy treats. Especially, the beauty of Islamic Center is we are so diverse. Every day there is a different community doing a communal dinner, right? It can be Turkish or Somali dinner or Pakistani or Indian. So you get to try different meals, you get to see each other, check on each other. So definitely that would be sorely missed. And just, I think, when we think of envision our praying, we think of being at Kaaba. And when you see at Khana Kaaba people doing like prayers together, that's how I think we are trying to capture that feeling when we are praying in community. So at times it can be more distracting. So I have always went back and forth. Sometimes I like praying in community, and especially on big nights or Friday nights, but then I prefer praying on my own too. So it's in some ways it would be advantageous that I don't have to go to work. I just have to comb my hair and round through telepsychiatry and still go back to my praying full time. So it can be advantageous. There would be fun about that, but then losing that communal touch, and especially the food. I would definitely miss the food.
Yes.
I'm open. Anyone wants to send me the food, I'm more than happy to.
Yes. Okay, next questions. No pressure.
So I also want to build on the thought, and maybe I always talk about this, and maybe having Mohammad Khalil here would help me. Would you talk about the concept of Ummah and being in community in Islam, how that is such integral part of Islam?
Yes, it is an integral part of Islam. Yeah, no,
I'm putting you on spot.
Yes, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think, when you look at the Quran, Islamic holy book, it's clear that there is this idea that you have to work with others, you have to be involved with others. One very famous chapter of the Quran is called Al-Asr, and it says that those who are the righteous ones, they're the ones who urge one another. They urge one another to the truth, and they urge one another to patience and perseverance. And what's interesting is it didn't just say stand up for the truth and be patient. It says urge one another to the truth, urge one another to patience and perseverance. So there is definitely, this communal dimension is critical. And that's actually why in Islamic tradition, people are discouraged from totally isolating themselves forever. Like, yeah, you can do it for a time. Muhammad himself, the Prophet, did it for a time. But to do it continuously is seen as, if, unless there's, of course, some other, like a mental health issue or whatever. But otherwise, one is expected to participate in society and work with others. So that's, yeah, so the issue of ummah becomes very critical. Absolutely.
So the peer modeling is important in Islam.
Oh, absolutely. 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 Yeah, great point. Okay, we have about 12 minutes left. Let's see what questions you have for those of you who are with us. Or comments.
Oh, food recipes.
I have a question about the elderly.
Yes.
So I think a lot of us have elderly relatives, or we know of people who are living on their own right now, and especially for many of them, since they don't even fast during Ramadan right now, because given their age and their sicknesses, like this is a time of, I think, a lot of isolation and fear. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about what we can do as a community to help our elderly through this period would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Abbasi.
I think it's a very important question, and I have been thinking about that too. Unfortunately, just offering virtual help, but then comes the question of how many are technically savvy and have access to internet. Right now, I think what I had recommended is just checking on people that we know are here, are elderly, don't have kids around them. I think it's imperative to all of us in the community to check on these people, make sure they have everything they need. My daughters have called few people if they need help with groceries. So that's another thing we can do, make sure they don't have to go out for groceries. And I think just making sure they're doing well, and even if we can, again, care packages, send some care packages out. And that's a point that I had raised, and I will raise again with Islamic Center to focus especially on those. But I know a lot of people from the community are stepping up and doing that.
Thank you. Actually, my grandmother lives pretty much by herself in California, and we're always calling her. And
They can they can liaise.
yeah. Yeah, and so we're always trying to, make sure she's not walking out by herself, or, she likes to walk a lot. So actually, my mom is in this group with us. She can maybe fill you in on that. Yeah, other questions? Oh, go ahead,
To keep her
Oh, hey!
Yes, thank you, Dr. Khalil, Dr. Abbasi. This is such a wonderful opportunity to be here and listen to all of this. And I know that support is very, very important. I'm making sure, of course, that my mom is supported as much as I can. It breaks my heart that I cannot travel to her right now. And my brother, God bless him, may Allah bless him. He's taking care of her. He makes sure that she has her groceries, and he stops by almost every day or every other day when it's possible. So it's challenging, but I told my kids, call your grandma every day, make sure that she's entertained, and she's a social butterfly. She loves to
That's good. That's
I
right.
think this is a very isolationist time. Like my grandmother, she runs a Quran class during Ramadan. She has like the women kind of come over to her house every day to read the whole book. And I think this is like a very, it's already an isolating experience, I think, to be elderly and live alone and whatnot. And I think this is just an added source of trauma in some ways. And we talk about our own social trauma, but I think for a lot of people who are immigrants to this country and don't really have networks and they live alone, it amplifies quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we do sometimes, like Zoom parties. So we have everyone there and all the family, and I call my mom on FaceTime and she joined us. So there are other ways to keep them connected as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I would like to, and having you here, I think it's so important to just send a message out to, again, I want to focus on the academic setting, having this being the finals week, and the extraordinary stress and trauma that the students are going through. Please be cognizant of that. Please don't. Usually I run into this, that some people think that using this as an excuse, but this is really one moment and time in our lives that all of us have been under a lot of pressure and stress. And please make sure whatever it needs to support your students that it is done.
No, absolutely. And for me, like I'm reaching out to a lot of young people as well, and I'm offering a lot of, coaching for free. Of course, coaching is different completely than therapy, completely different, but it's anyone who, like I'm doing that for free and having a Facebook page now and putting all kinds of different messages on it for young people. So I'm trying to do also for the community here as well.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure
that I'm in service here as well here.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure also that if we have professors, and I know we have professors here, but one thing to keep in mind is that some folks may be overseas, and maybe an exam is scheduled during the time that they're breaking their fast.
Oh,
so
yes.
Something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very important point.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's see. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Abbasi. You wanted to say something?
I just wanted to add that in the end, all of us in the community are trying very hard to be there, be it for MSU, Spartan family, or be it the Muslim community, or be it Lansing, East Lansing community. So we all are trying to be there for each other. Please reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out. Any way we can help you, support you, and help you navigate this process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Abbasi. Okay, we have about 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes. Other questions? And if you don't get a chance to ask a question, feel free to email us. I'm sure Dr. Abbasi and we both would be happy to take any questions.
So I was actually wondering, if you recommend any app or something where we can find the timing of iftar and sahur. I know it is in itself kind of different for everybody, but still, in general, or maybe which specifies like the differences, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are some interesting differences with regard to when you actually break the fast. There's, you'll notice differences between Sunnis and Shi'i Muslims regarding the timing. And then within the Sunni schools of law, the madhabs, you'll notice differences. I'll just say this, if you're in town, you're in East Lansing, the Islamic Center of East Lansing, they have a list of their times. If you're looking for apps, I think you would have to look for an app specific to the school of thought that you're going by to get the precise time. But otherwise, if you're happy to go with whatever the local community is doing. I know the Islamic Center of East Lansing has on their website, they've just posted the Ramadan times. Prayer times, I should say. So, okay, thank you, Raghib. Other questions? Elisa, you want to ask a question? Oh, okay, sorry.
You want to say a short prayer in the end, wishing everyone well?
Yeah, I guess we will conclude then. No questions. I just want to make sure there are no questions. Okay, no questions. So yes, we wish for the best. We pray everyone is doing well, and I'll leave it at that. I hope again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have Dr. Farha Abbasi and Mohammad Khalil, and we have other really outstanding faculty on this in this call. So like Professor Lisa Perkins at Western Michigan, Professor Nazizullah Javardi, and there are many others. So we will leave it at that. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you, and Ramadan Kareem. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Happy Ramadan.
Yes.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.